My name is Rachel Moore. I'm 30 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to be someone my parents could finally see, someone they'd be proud to call their daughter. But tonight, under the soft lights of the Garden Room Bistro in Silvergate, Oregon, I finally let myself believe that none of that mattered anymore. Tonight was supposed to be mine, and no one could take it away, or so I thought. I glanced around the elegant dining room, breathing in the comforting scent of fresh roses and subtle notes of vanilla candles. Every detail was perfect, exactly as Daniel and I had envisioned. We'd chosen soft string lights, gold-rimmed dinnerware, and delicate floral centerpieces that reflected the warm glow of joy filling my heart. Daniel stood beside me, his hand gently resting against my back, a steady reminder of everything good that had come into my life since meeting him 4 years earlier. Tall, calm, and reassuring, Daniel had been my anchor since our first conversation during a film industry mixer. As a commercial film producer, he had a way of capturing life in all its raw authenticity, a skill that had quickly made him the most trustworthy person I'd ever known. Our closest friends, co-workers, and extended family gathered tonight to celebrate our engagement. In just 4 short months, Daniel Reyes would become my husband. As I surveyed the room, smiling faces met mine. Lily Chen, my best friend and maid of honor, winked from a nearby table, and Daniel's parents, always supportive, lifted their glasses in our direction. Yet, as my eyes drifted toward the table where my parents sat, my stomach twisted slightly. My mother, Gloria, offered a smile that seemed tight and forced, her eyes reflecting something more calculating than joyful. Beside her, my father, Peter, stared silently into his glass of wine, avoiding eye contact. Next to them, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone, was my younger sister, Vanessa. Even at 26, Vanessa behaved like the world owed her something, wearing entitlement like a second skin. She'd barely acknowledged me, acting as though this night, my engagement, my happiness, was an inconvenience to her. I shook off the familiar sting of disappointment. Tonight wasn't about old grudges or buried resentment. It was about Daniel and me, about moving forward. Suddenly, Gloria stood, lightly tapping her wine glass with a silver spoon. A gentle ringing echoed through the restaurant, silencing conversations and drawing attention to her poised figure at the center table. The guests turned toward her expectantly, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe, finally, she'd say something that healed instead of hurt. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Gloria began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "First, let me congratulate my beautiful daughter Rachel and her fiancé Daniel. I wish you both a marriage filled with love, joy, and endless happiness." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Daniel squeezed my hand reassuringly under the table, and I leaned into his touch, grateful. But my mother's next words sliced through the warmth with precision. "However, I have another announcement," Gloria continued, her tone colder, more deliberate. "After careful consideration, Peter and I have decided that the $60,000 we set aside for Rachel's wedding will instead go to her sister Vanessa." An icy silence blanketed the room. I blinked, certain I must have misunderstood. A quiet laugh escaped my lips as I glanced around, expecting someone else to laugh with me at the absurdity. But nobody did. "That's funny, Mom," I said hesitantly, trying to keep my voice light. "But we both know that money is already mine. You can't just give it away." Gloria's eyes hardened, her voice turning sharply dismissive. "This isn't a joke, Rachel. Vanessa is getting married soon after you, and she clearly needs the funds more urgently." Heat rushed to my cheeks as disbelief turned quickly to anger. "Mom, we've been through this. That money was transferred into my personal account years ago. Daniel and I have already budgeted every penny. Our wedding, our future home. You can't just take it back." Vanessa suddenly stood, nearly knocking over her chair as she glared at me across the table. "Stop being so selfish, Rachel," she snapped. You knew I needed help months ago, but you've never once offered to share. I met her gaze head-on, my voice steady. I've planned carefully, Vanessa. You had the same amount and blew through it recklessly. I'm not responsible for your bad decisions. Gloria's face flushed crimson with anger. Your sister lives simply, she hissed, her voice quivering with barely contained fury. Her fiancé is struggling to build something for their future. You've always had more. I've always worked harder. I fired back immediately, refusing to shrink under her glare. I planned, saved, and acted responsibly. I'm sorry, but I'm not handing over my future to clean up Vanessa's mess. Gloria stepped forward swiftly, closing the space between us in a heartbeat. Before I realized what was happening, her hand whipped through the air, landing sharply against my cheek. The brutal sound echoed off the restaurant walls, freezing every guest in stunned silence. My head snapped to the side, cheek throbbing, tears stinging the corners of my eyes, not from physical pain alone, but from shock and betrayal. The silence stretched painfully long as I slowly turned my face back to meet her eyes, my voice trembling with emotion, but steady enough to be clear. You don't get to hit me just because I refused you. A sharp intake of breath broke the silence from somewhere nearby. Then a quiet voice behind me, urgent and clear, spoke softly into a phone. Yes, police, please. There's been an assault at the Garden Room Bistro. As distant sirens began to wail toward us, Daniel's grip on my hand tightened protectively. Vanessa's eyes widened for once, registering shock rather than entitlement. My father stood frozen, eyes cast downward, offering no comfort, no defense. Gloria, suddenly pale and shaken, stepped back, realizing too late what she had done. Within minutes, the restaurant doors opened, revealing 2 uniformed officers scanning the stunned room. The lead officer approached me carefully, his voice gentle, yet professional. Miss, are you the one who was assaulted? I nodded, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. Yes, officer. I was. The quiet murmurs around the restaurant grew, whispers of disbelief mingling with sympathy. The officers turned toward Gloria, who tried to protest weakly, insisting it was just family business. But the law didn't see it that way, not tonight. As the officers escorted Gloria out into the cool evening air, handcuffed and humiliated, I knew this was just the beginning. But for the first time, despite the throbbing in my cheek, I felt something else. A deep, powerful determination. I wouldn't be the silent victim anymore. Tonight, everything had changed. Tonight, I decided to fight back. As the restaurant slowly emptied, Daniel guided me gently toward the exit, his arm wrapped securely around my shoulder, shielding me from curious, sympathetic gazes. We walked quietly into the cool night air, leaving the place that was supposed to mark a joyful beginning, now tainted by humiliation and heartbreak. Later that night, after icing my swollen cheek, I lay awake beside Daniel, my mind replaying the painful scene over and over. This betrayal wasn't new. It was simply a darker, more visible eruption of a family dynamic I'd always tried to ignore. My mother, Gloria Moore, had always been fiercely protective, but only of Vanessa. Vanessa was 4 years younger than me, the eternal baby of the family. Ever since we were children, she could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Even when her choices cost everyone dearly, they rushed to shield her from consequences. At 17, my parents established separate funds for both of us, $60,000 each, intended to support our education and life goals. But while I viewed mine as a precious foundation to carefully build upon, Vanessa saw hers as endless fuel for impulsive desires. I remembered the day clearly when I gained full control of my fund at 19. I was cautious, investing wisely and preserving the majority for major life milestones, determined never to rely solely on others. After attending a public university on a partial scholarship, I allowed the fund to quietly grow, always mindful of the future. Vanessa took a different path. She chose an expensive private university, not for academic rigor, but for its glamorous image. Less than 3 years later, she dropped out, bored and restless. Instead of reevaluating, Vanessa plunged her remaining funds into an ill-advised boutique startup. She hosted extravagant launch parties, paid for influencers, and spent lavishly on branding without any clear business plan. Predictably, it failed spectacularly, leaving her nothing but debt and an expensive car, a bitter reminder of wasted potential. Yet, my parents never blamed Vanessa. Instead, they praised her courage and ambition, offering endless emotional and financial support while quietly resenting me for my stability and success. I could still hear Gloria's words clearly. Vanessa needs guidance and love, Rachel. You never needed anything. I brushed away a tear, feeling Daniel's comforting presence beside me in bed. You awake? He murmured softly. Yeah, I whispered back, just thinking. Want to talk about it? I sighed deeply, turning toward him, finding reassurance in his steady eyes. It's just, I don't understand why they resent me so much for being responsible. It's like they think I'm heartless because I don't break down, don't ask them for anything. Daniel gently touched my cheek, his fingertips tracing the edges of my bruise. You're strong, Rachel. They fear that strength because they can't control it. His words settled somewhere deep within me, bringing clarity. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe this resentment wasn't about money or Vanessa's mistakes. Maybe it was about control, about my unwillingness to bend to their expectations. A few weeks passed quietly, but the tension never eased. Gloria had been released on bail, but there had been no apologies or efforts to reconcile. My father, Peter, remained stubbornly silent, refusing to take sides, or rather, silently choosing Vanessa by default. Then, one afternoon, as I returned from work, I saw an envelope in my mailbox marked with a stern-looking logo, Holland and Sutter Associates, attorneys at law. My hands trembled as I tore it open, reading the words with growing disbelief. My own parents were suing me for control of the $60,000 that legally belonged to me. At first, the lawsuit felt absurd, laughable even. But beneath the absurdity lay a bitter truth. They would rather drag me through court than admit Vanessa had failed. It wasn't about justice. It was about pride, favoritism, and control. Determined to protect what was rightfully mine, I immediately contacted a sharp attorney named Tasha Green. Tasha had an imposing reputation in Silvergate for fighting fiercely for her clients. During our first meeting, she carefully reviewed my financial documents before confidently setting them aside. They have nothing, Rachel, she said calmly. This money was gifted to you with no restrictions. Their lawsuit is intimidation, pure and simple. Then why bother with all this? I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. Tasha looked at me knowingly. Because when control fails, manipulation begins. They're hoping you'll fold under pressure. The first preliminary hearing was painful, but clarifying. Vanessa stood smugly, confidently presenting a narrative in which I had betrayed the family by hoarding funds meant to support education alone. But Tasha was prepared. Calmly, firmly, she questioned Vanessa about her own spending habits. Miss Moore, Tasha began, her voice measured, is it true you used the majority of your fund for purposes other than education? Vanessa hesitated, eyes narrowing in irritation. Not all of it. In fact, Tasha pressed, you dropped out of college after 2.5 years and poured the rest into a boutique business and a luxury vehicle, correct? Vanessa looked cornered. That's irrelevant, she snapped. On the contrary, Tasha responded calmly, turning toward the judge. It demonstrates clearly there were no strict conditions placed on these funds. The only difference is Rachel was responsible and Vanessa wasn't. The judge raised an eyebrow thoughtfully, jotting down notes as the courtroom grew quiet. My parents exchanged tense glances, visibly uncomfortable. Vanessa sat back, lips pressed tightly together, shooting venomous looks toward me. The hearing ended with no immediate verdict, just a promise that more painful court dates lay ahead. But as I stepped out onto the courthouse steps, Daniel wrapped his arms securely around me, whispering softly, "You were incredible in there." My heart lifted slightly. For the first time, standing my ground felt empowering. It wasn't just about money. It was about self-respect, about refusing to shrink into the shadow of my family's favoritism and manipulation. Yet, as Daniel and I walked away from the courthouse together, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this fight was far from over. Vanessa wasn't used to losing, and my parents weren't ready to let go of control. I knew them too well. They'd strike back in other ways I wasn't yet prepared for. But whatever lay ahead, one thing had become crystal clear to me: I wouldn't back down. Not this time. Not ever again. In the weeks following that first court appearance, life settled into an uncomfortable rhythm. Each morning, I woke up feeling drained before the day even began. Balancing my demanding job as a UI/UX designer with the constant barrage of legal paperwork was exhausting. Daniel was unwavering, but even his quiet strength couldn't erase the shadow my family cast over our lives. One afternoon, as I reviewed menus and floral arrangements for our wedding, my phone buzzed sharply. My cousin Jenna's name flashed across the screen. Jenna and I hadn't spoken in months, not since the disastrous engagement party. But curiosity outweighed caution. "Hey, Jenna," I answered tentatively, expecting awkward pleasantries. "Rachel," she began slowly, sympathy evident in her tone. "I'm just calling to say, I'm so sorry about your wedding." My pulse quickened in confusion. "Sorry about what?" "Our wedding is still on." There was silence, then hesitant embarrassment in her voice. "Oh God, Rachel, you haven't heard?" My chest tightened painfully. "Heard what?" Jenna exhaled heavily. "Your mom called everyone. She said you and Daniel called it off because he cheated on you." For a moment, my breath froze completely. "What?" "That's insane. There's more," Jenna said regretfully. "She told people you're having some kind of emotional breakdown. Vanessa's been repeating it everywhere too." Shock and betrayal surged through me once again, my fingers trembling as I ended the call. I immediately checked my email, my heart dropping as I saw a series of frantic messages from confused friends and distant relatives. They'd received emails supposedly from me, stating the wedding had been canceled due to Daniel's infidelity. They looked authentic, but they weren't from my account. Someone had meticulously crafted a false narrative to sabotage our happiness. My mind raced. Vanessa! It had to be her. This was more than legal maneuvering. It was personal, malicious. As rage built inside me, Daniel walked into the room, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked softly, concern etched deeply into his features. I showed him the emails, my voice shaking with anger. Daniel's eyes darkened as he took in the cruel messages. "There's more," he said grimly, pulling out his phone. "Vanessa texted me earlier. She sent these." He showed me a set of photos, poorly edited, obviously fake images, showing my face awkwardly superimposed onto another woman's body, standing intimately close to an unfamiliar man. They were pathetic attempts, yet deeply disturbing. Daniel's jaw clenched tightly. "I didn't believe it for a second, Rachel, but my parents saw them too. Vanessa is trying to poison everyone against you, against us." The depth of her betrayal was staggering. This wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, intentional cruelty. I could understand resentment, jealousy even, but actively sabotaging my relationship crossed every line imaginable. That evening, in a moment of desperate clarity, I called Aunt Darlene, my mother's younger sister, one of the few family members who had never fully taken sides. She answered softly, as though expecting my call. "Rachel, I'm so sorry." "Aunt Darlene," I whispered, voice cracking under the weight of hurt. "Why are they doing this?" She sighed deeply, sadness evident in every word. "Because your mother always puts Vanessa's happiness first, even if it means destroying yours." She's convinced herself Vanessa is the victim. And you? Well, you're the easiest one to blame. The truth hurt more coming from someone who understood. I swallowed hard, blinking away tears I refused to let fall. I'm tired of being their scapegoat, I finally managed to say, my voice steadier now. I won't let them destroy my life anymore. Then don't, Aunt Darlene urged gently. Stand firm, Rachel. Protect what's yours, your relationship, your integrity, your future. Inspired by her words, Daniel and I spent the following days taking concrete measures. We secured our online accounts, sent messages correcting the lies, and carefully explained the truth to trusted friends and family. Yet, despite our efforts, the damage had already been done. Some people would always doubt us, whispers lingering in the background, making the wedding preparations feel hollow. With the ceremony approaching, Daniel and I decided we couldn't leave anything to chance. We hired security for our wedding day, giving them explicit instructions. Under no circumstances were Gloria, Peter, or Vanessa allowed on the premises. It hurt deeply erecting these barriers against my own family, but it was necessary. They'd proven beyond a doubt they were capable of anything. As Daniel finalized plans with the security team, I sat alone one night, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes seemed darker, older somehow. This experience had changed me, but perhaps in a necessary way. I'd spent my life trying to earn their approval, chasing love I was never meant to receive. Now, standing firmly in my own truth, I felt a strength I'd never known. I was no longer Rachel, the obedient daughter desperately hoping for acceptance. I was Rachel, the woman who knew exactly who she was, refusing to be silenced or shamed. The eve of our wedding arrived quicker than expected. Daniel and I shared a quiet dinner, promising each other we'd never allow outside forces, especially my family, to define our happiness again. That night, lying awake beside him, I realized something profound. My family believed love was conditional, that acceptance had a price. But real love was unconditional. Daniel had taught me that. Tomorrow, when I walked down that aisle without my parents, without my sister, I'd do so proudly, understanding deeply that I wasn't losing family. I was finally discovering what family truly meant. Yet, even with that quiet strength within me, nothing could have prepared me for what Vanessa would attempt next on my wedding day itself. My wedding morning arrived cloaked in an uneasy quiet. The sun broke gently over Hollow Creek vineyards, bathing the rolling green hills in soft golden light. The scene was exactly as Daniel and I envisioned, a picturesque outdoor ceremony under a delicate floral archway, rows of white chairs awaiting our loved ones. Yet, beneath the beautiful setting lurked tension and apprehension I couldn't fully shake. In the bridal suite, Lily helped me into my gown, her gentle chatter doing little to soothe my nerves. She smoothed my veil, smiling reassuringly. Rachel, don't let them steal this from you. Today belongs to you and Daniel. I nodded silently, my heart still burdened by thoughts of my family's betrayal. How far would Vanessa go? Would my parents respect our boundaries, or would they again attempt to sabotage our happiness? As guests began arriving, the soft hum of conversations drifted toward us, mixing with the faint melodies from the string quartet playing in the distance. Lily excused herself briefly, leaving me alone to take a deep breath, hoping to steady my trembling hands. Then came a quiet knock at the suite door. I turned to see one of our hired security guards standing respectfully in the doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, but his tone hinted at something serious. Miss Moore, he began cautiously, we've intercepted someone attempting to enter through a rear service gate. My pulse quickened, dread settling deep within me. Who was it? He hesitated slightly before answering. It was your sister, Vanessa Moore. My heart sank. Even today, especially today, she couldn't resist. Was she alone? Yes, he replied carefully, but we checked her belongings. She had a large can of red paint concealed in a tote bag. The air caught sharply in my throat. Red paint. to ruin my dress, the venue, everything we'd planned meticulously. Fury warred with grief inside me. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined. "Would you like us to involve local authorities?" the guard asked calmly. "We can press charges immediately." For a long moment, I considered it. The thought of Vanessa facing legal consequences for her cruelty was tempting. But I remembered something Tasha had told me weeks earlier. Not every battle needs to be fought publicly. Sometimes the strongest victory is simply moving forward without them. I finally shook my head slowly. "No, don't involve the police. Just remove her from the property and ensure she doesn't return. And double check for my parents. They might still try something." He nodded respectfully, leaving quietly. I sank onto a nearby chair, struggling to contain my emotions. Lily returned moments later, instantly sensing my distress. "Rachel?" Her voice was gentle but urgent. "What happened?" "Vanessa," I whispered bitterly. "She tried to sabotage everything again. Red paint, Lily. She wanted to ruin my dress, my wedding, our entire day." Lily knelt beside me, squeezing my hand comfortingly. "But she failed. Today is yours, Rachel. Don't let her steal even one more moment." Taking her words to heart, I stood, taking a deep breath, forcing the anger and pain back. Today was about Daniel and me, our love, our commitment, our future. I wouldn't let Vanessa's spite overshadow our joy. Moments later, my uncle, my father's younger brother, who had long disapproved of my parents' unfair treatment of me, arrived quietly to walk me down the aisle. Seeing him standing proudly at my side eased some of my sadness. As we stepped into the sunlight, I felt strength return to my heart, knowing true family wasn't always determined by blood, but by genuine love and support. Guests turned to face me, their smiles warm and sincere. At the end of the aisle stood Daniel, his eyes locked onto mine, radiating calm strength and deep love. Every step closer felt like leaving behind the bitterness, shedding the weight of betrayal with each measured stride. We exchanged vows beneath the floral arch, speaking of loyalty, respect, and unconditional love, words carrying even deeper meaning given everything we'd overcome together. As Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt the profound truth of the moment. I wasn't alone anymore. I had him, and together we could face anything. When the officiant declared us husband and wife, cheers erupted warmly around us. Genuine love and happiness flowed freely, a stark contrast to the cold bitterness that had marred the past few months. During the reception, guests danced and laughed, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil we'd endured. At one point, my Aunt Darlene approached, her embrace tight and meaningful. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," she whispered. "You stood your ground, and now you're free." Her words lingered long after the final toast had been made. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel and I slipped away quietly under the velvet sky. Rice scattered joyfully around us, thrown by friends who genuinely wished us happiness. Sitting in the car, Daniel took my hand, his eyes soft and sincere. "We made it," he said gently. I nodded, smiling softly for the first time in weeks. We did. Yet, even as we drove away, leaving the vineyard behind, I couldn't escape the reality that my family still hadn't learned. Vanessa's wedding was soon approaching, and I'd heard whispers already about extravagant plans, funded by debts my parents could barely afford. I wondered briefly if they'd ever recognize their own mistakes, or if pride would blind them forever. But tonight, those thoughts didn't matter. Tonight belonged solely to us. Little did I know, my family's desperate attempt to preserve Vanessa's image would soon backfire spectacularly, exposing truths they could no longer hide, and finally giving me the justice I so deeply deserved. Weeks after our wedding, Daniel and I settled into a small but charming apartment just outside Silvergate. With careful budgeting, the remainder of my wedding fund became a comfortable down payment, finally giving us a place we could truly call our own. It was modest, but it was ours, built from determination, planning, and resilience. Life slowly began to return to normal. Yet the shadow of family conflict lingered. The bitterness hadn't faded, and the ache of betrayal still caught me off guard, especially during quiet moments. Holidays came and went without a single message from my parents or Vanessa. At first, their silence stung, reopening wounds I thought had healed. But gradually, a sense of peace began to replace the pain. One afternoon, while picking up groceries at a local market, I heard a familiar voice calling my name. Turning around, I saw my cousin Natalie waving warmly from across the aisle. I smiled, feeling a genuine warmth I hadn't felt from family in months. After a quick hug, Natalie hesitated briefly before saying, "Rachel, have you heard about Vanessa's wedding?" A wry smile tugged at my lips. "We haven't exactly been in touch." She lowered her voice, glancing around discreetly. "It's turned into a spectacle. Your parents took out a huge loan. It's at the Grand Oak Estate, downtown. Super lavish, gourmet chefs, designer dresses, champagne fountains. They're trying to make a point, I guess." I felt a brief pang of sadness, not envy, but disappointment that my parents were still blind to reality. Natalie continued quietly, "But here's the thing, not everyone is going. Quite a few family members declined the invitation after what they did to you. It's like people are finally seeing who Vanessa really is." For a moment, I felt vindicated, but then sadness settled back in. My parents were risking their financial security and reputation, all to perpetuate Vanessa's illusion of perfection. "They can't afford it," I murmured softly, almost to myself. "And Vanessa will never be grateful." Natalie squeezed my arm gently. "Rachel, you've done everything right. You were strong when most people would have broken. Whatever happens next isn't your responsibility." Her words stayed with me long after we parted ways. She was right. This was a path my parents chose willingly. Yet, watching their decisions spiral out of control was still deeply unsettling. 2 weeks later, Vanessa's extravagant wedding made headlines, but not in the way my parents had hoped. Photos appeared online, grand decor, expensive gowns, and over-the-top details. But what captured the public's attention wasn't the lavishness. It was the news of financial trouble surrounding it. A prominent local blogger reported my parents had leveraged their home to fund Vanessa's big day. It became painfully clear they'd sacrificed everything for one moment of vanity. The gossip was relentless, whispers spreading quickly through Silvergate's close-knit community. Then, as if fate itself had intervened, I received an unexpected phone call one evening. It was Aunt Darlene, her voice heavy with regret. "Rachel, your parents have lost the house." I sat down slowly, absorbing her words. "They couldn't keep up with the payments," she explained, voice strained. "The bank foreclosed. They're staying with Vanessa temporarily, but things are tense." I felt no satisfaction, only deep sadness. Their pride had cost them everything. Vanessa, predictably, blamed everyone but herself, refusing to acknowledge her role in their financial ruin. Daniel watched me quietly after I ended the call, his expression gentle but guarded. "You okay?" I sighed deeply. "I don't even know. Part of me feels sorry for them. Another part wonders why I should care when they brought it all upon themselves." He moved closer, wrapping his arms around me comfortingly. "Because you're compassionate, Rachel, even when others don't deserve it. That's why you're different from them." In his words, I finally found clarity. My compassion didn't mean weakness, it meant strength. I could acknowledge their pain without making it mine to carry. Yet, as the news spread further, Vanessa did exactly what I'd anticipated. Instead of taking responsibility, she shifted blame, painting herself as a victim yet again. But this time, fewer people listened. The damage was too clear, too severe. Friends distanced themselves, relatives expressed quiet disappointment, and Vanessa found herself isolated, forced to reckon with the truth she had long denied. One evening, months later, while Daniel and I were preparing dinner, there was a quiet knock at our door. Opening it, I froze in surprise. My father stood there, older somehow, eyes tired and hollow. It was the first time he'd reached out since the engagement party. "Rachel," he said hesitantly, voice low and filled with regret. "Can we talk?" I considered turning him away. I owed him nothing. But instead, I opened the door wider, inviting him in with a simple nod. Daniel quietly stepped aside, giving us space. My father sat heavily on the couch, eyes fixed downward. Finally, he spoke quietly, almost whispering, "I'm sorry, Rachel. We made mistakes, huge mistakes. We lost sight of what mattered. Your mother still won't admit it, and Vanessa, well, you know Vanessa. But I'm sorry. For everything." Emotion flooded me, and tears stung my eyes, not because his apology made everything better, but because it finally acknowledged the truth I'd always known. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied carefully, "but you have to understand, words alone can't heal this." He nodded slowly, understanding. "I know. I'm not asking you to forgive immediately. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I've changed." We sat in silence for a moment before he stood, promising quietly he'd keep in touch. As he left, Daniel returned, squeezing my hand supportively. "You okay?" I looked into his eyes, smiling softly. For the first time, I think I might be. That night, as I stood on our balcony overlooking the city lights, I realized something profound. My parents' favoritism hadn't just hurt me. It had ultimately destroyed their family, their security, and their happiness. Vanessa's entitlement had been encouraged to the point of ruin. Yet, through the pain, I'd found clarity and peace. The $60,000 wedding fund hadn't merely bought us a home. It had secured our freedom. Freedom from manipulation, guilt, and toxic family dynamics. Freedom to build a life based on genuine love, respect, and mutual support. I turned back inside, where Daniel waited quietly, his eyes gentle and patient. Stepping into his arms, I finally let go of the last threads of hurt that bound me to the past. Because now, more clearly than ever before, I understood exactly what real family meant. And it had nothing to do with blood. It had everything to do with love. In the months following my father's visit, I cautiously allowed him back into my life, slowly and only on my terms. We met occasionally for coffee or dinner, each conversation careful and guarded at first. But gradually, the awkwardness softened into something genuine. He showed sincere remorse, often admitting quietly how he'd allowed Gloria's favoritism toward Vanessa to dictate our family's dynamics for far too long. One afternoon, over coffee at a small cafe downtown, he finally shared a painful truth. "Rachel," he began hesitantly, staring into his cup, "I was a coward. For years, I saw what your mother was doing, how she favored Vanessa, how unfair it was to you. I saw your pain, your disappointment, but I stayed silent because I feared conflict more than I valued justice." Hearing his confession, I felt both relief and lingering sadness. His honesty was a start, but the lost years remained heavy between us. "And now," I asked quietly, "do you still feel that way?" He shook his head, slowly, thoughtfully. "No. Now I see clearly what silence has cost us all. Our home, our relationships, our family itself." "And Vanessa?" I pressed gently, despite knowing the answer might hurt. His shoulders sagged slightly. "Vanessa hasn't changed. She still sees herself as the victim, blaming everyone but herself. Gloria refuses to let her face consequences even now. They're caught in a cycle I can't break." I reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. "You can't save people from themselves, Dad. Vanessa and Mom need to want to change." He sighed deeply, understanding. "I know, but it doesn't make losing them any easier." Our relationship remained fragile, but it was honest. Daniel supported my cautious reconnection with my father, always reminding me that forgiveness was for my benefit, not theirs. Meanwhile, life continued to heal around us. Daniel and I worked hard, saving carefully, building a stable, meaningful life filled with love and respect. Occasionally, I'd run into old friends or distant relatives who expressed sympathy or admiration. Yet, no one fully understood the weight I'd carried, the betrayal, heartbreak, and the courage it took to walk away from family manipulation. One evening, almost a year after our wedding, Daniel came home with an envelope. Inside was an invitation to Aunt Darlene's 60th birthday celebration, a large family gathering we couldn't simply avoid. "Do you want to go?" Daniel asked carefully, gauging my reaction. I hesitated, a year's worth of healing, suddenly vulnerable. "Gloria and Vanessa will be there," I whispered, anxiety knotting my stomach. Daniel held my gaze, steadily. "They don't control you anymore, Rachel. You've already proven your strength. But we don't have to go if you're not ready." After several days of consideration, I finally decided. I wouldn't let fear or resentment dictate my life. We'd attend the celebration, not as victims, but as survivors. The evening of Aunt Darlene's birthday arrived. The party was at a quiet country club, elegant but understated. Walking in, Daniel's hand resting reassuringly against my back, I felt calm but wary. Immediately, eyes turned toward us. Curious, sympathetic, some openly admiring. I saw Gloria across the room, rigid and pale, pretending she hadn't noticed our arrival. Vanessa stood near her, visibly uncomfortable, barely acknowledging anyone who greeted her. My father nodded warmly, genuine happiness evident in his eyes. Throughout the evening, Daniel and I mingled comfortably, reconnecting with family members who had distanced themselves due to Gloria and Vanessa's drama. Many privately expressed respect for how we'd handled everything. The wound still felt raw, but standing confidently among those who truly cared made me realize how far we'd come. Later, as the evening quieted, I found myself face to face with my mother near the balcony doors. We stood silently for a moment, the space between us filled with years of unspoken hurt. Finally, Gloria broke the silence, her voice barely audible. "You look well, Rachel." I nodded politely, careful but composed. "I am well." She hesitated, pride visibly battling within her. I'm sorry things happened as they did. Perhaps we both made mistakes. It wasn't the apology I needed, but it was more than she'd ever given. I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "Mom, mistakes are forgivable, but cruelty and deliberate harm aren't just mistakes." She recoiled slightly, pride flaring again briefly. "I did what I thought best for Vanessa." "Yes," I interrupted gently but firmly. "Always Vanessa. And look where it brought you." Gloria fell silent, her eyes briefly shining with tears before she quickly regained her composure. "I suppose there's nothing left to say." "No," I agreed softly. "There isn't." As I walked away, sadness lingered, but relief washed over me as well. I'd said what needed saying, without anger or bitterness, simply truth. Outside on the terrace, Daniel found me, slipping his arm warmly around my waist. "How do you feel?" "Free," I whispered, leaning into him. For the first time, truly free. We stood quietly together, looking up into the star-filled sky. I'd once believed that family meant unconditional support, but now understood family required mutual respect and trust. Gloria and Vanessa had chosen their path, one of denial and pride, and I'd chosen mine, one of honesty, courage, and dignity. At home later that night, Daniel and I sat quietly on our balcony, wrapped in a shared blanket against the cool night air. The city below shimmered softly in the moonlight. "You've come so far," Daniel whispered, gently kissing my forehead. "You're stronger than you ever knew." "I had to be," I replied quietly, turning to look deeply into his eyes. "But I didn't do it alone." He smiled softly, his voice earnest. "You never have to." In that simple truth I found peace. I'd faced unimaginable betrayal, survived relentless sabotage, and emerged stronger than ever. The revenge I'd once sought had come quietly, not through spite, but through my own resilience and happiness. I hadn't simply survived, I'd thrived. Whatever the future held, I knew one thing clearly. Love wasn't conditional. Acceptance wasn't earned through obedience, and sometimes the strongest family was the one you chose yourself. The holidays arrived once again, this time marked by warmth instead of emptiness. Daniel and I filled our apartment with simple decorations, twinkling lights and evergreen wreaths, the scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. Friends gathered around our table, sharing laughter and stories late into the night, transforming our home into exactly what I'd always dreamed of, a sanctuary built from genuine affection. Yet, as I stood quietly by our window one snowy evening, watching delicate flakes gently blanket Silvergate, thoughts of my family inevitably surfaced. There had been no contact since Aunt Darlene's party, no attempts at reconciliation beyond my father's continued, quiet effort. Vanessa and Gloria remained firmly entrenched in their bitterness, still clinging desperately to the illusion they'd chosen. "I can tell when you're thinking of them," Daniel murmured softly, slipping his arms gently around my waist. "Are you all right?" I leaned back against him, nodding slowly. "I am. It's strange. I used to feel like a part of me was missing without them, but now I feel whole." "That's because you chose your path," Daniel replied gently, his warmth grounding me. "You built your own life, one not dependent on their approval." He was right. Every decision I'd made, standing up for myself, refusing to yield, forgiving cautiously but maintaining boundaries, had led me here, to this quiet moment of true peace. As the new year began, life moved forward beautifully. My career flourished, bringing exciting opportunities, while Daniel advanced in his work, producing films that resonated with authenticity and purpose. Together, we grew stronger, our relationship deeper with each passing day. Then, one mild spring evening, Daniel came home looking unusually thoughtful. Over dinner, his eyes shone with barely contained excitement. "Rachel, there's something I've wanted to talk to you about," he began carefully, reaching across the table to hold my hand. "We've built something special here, but there's one more step I'd love for us to take." I tilted my head, curious but hopeful. "What is it?" He hesitated briefly, then smiled warmly. "I want us to start our own family, not defined by the past, but created together from love and trust. You'd make an incredible mother, Rachel." Tears blurred my vision instantly, my heart swelling with a joy I'd long denied myself. "You think so?" I whispered. He nodded, squeezing my hand tenderly. "Absolutely. And our child would know exactly what true love means. Unconditional, supportive, and free of conditions." Emotion overcame me. The family I'd always craved, the one I'd never had, was finally within reach. Not through the relatives who had raised me, but through the partner who had stood unwaveringly at my side. A few months later, I found myself staring down at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, heart pounding with equal parts excitement and gratitude. Daniel's face lit up joyfully when I showed him, tears of happiness filling his eyes as he embraced me. Throughout my pregnancy, occasional pangs of longing for maternal advice or a supportive sister surfaced. But each time, friends filled the void, becoming a chosen family stronger than any I'd ever known. Lily eagerly threw a baby shower filled with laughter and kindness. Aunt Darlene quietly knitted tiny sweaters, and my father, still cautious but committed, offered quiet support, determined to prove he had truly changed. The day our daughter was born, the world shifted forever. Holding her tiny form gently against my chest, her soft breaths mingling with mine, I finally understood unconditional love. Pure, fierce, limitless. Daniel sat close beside me, his eyes bright with wonder as he carefully touched her tiny fingers. "What should we name her?" he whispered gently. I smiled softly, warmth flooding my heart. "Grace," I answered without hesitation, to remind us that true strength comes from compassion, not bitterness. In Grace, Daniel and I created something precious and uniquely ours, a legacy free from old wounds and family baggage. Our little family flourished, built upon values of respect, trust, and love we deliberately chose each day. Occasionally, news from Vanessa reached me. Her marriage strained under the weight of debt, her lifestyle no longer sustainable. Gloria stubbornly clung to denial, while my father slowly rebuilt his life apart from them, learning humility through loss and redemption. Yet none of their choices defined mine. The peace I found had come at a steep price, but it was worth every painful moment, every heartbreaking betrayal I'd overcome. One quiet afternoon, as Daniel and I watched Grace toddle happily across our apartment, laughter bubbling sweetly from her tiny mouth, he squeezed my hand softly. "Rachel," looking at Grace, "I finally understand something important." I glanced at him, curiously, heart content. "What's that?" He smiled warmly, eyes filled with sincerity. "Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who chooses to stay, to love you unconditionally, to respect your boundaries and celebrate your strength." His words settled deep within me, finally healing the last, lingering pain from the past. I leaned into him, savoring the perfect, simple moment. Later that evening, as I sat quietly beside Grace's crib, watching her sleep peacefully, my phone lit up softly, displaying an unfamiliar number. Hesitantly, I answered, "Rachel." It was Vanessa's voice, subdued, uncertain. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "Yes?" She hesitated, emotion evident beneath her pride. I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to tell you." I paused carefully, absorbing the sincerity behind her shaky words. "Thank you," I finally replied gently. "But forgiveness takes time and actions." "I understand," she whispered, voice trembling. "I just wanted you to know I'm working on changing." After ending the call, I sat quietly in the darkness, processing her apology. Maybe people could change. Maybe Vanessa was sincere. But either way, her journey wasn't mine to control or carry. Stepping into our bedroom later, Daniel wrapped his arms around me gently, sensing my introspection. "Everything all right?" I nodded softly, smiling with quiet strength. "Better than ever, because I've learned something important tonight." He raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" I smiled, genuine peace filling my heart. "My past doesn't define me, and my family isn't something I was born into. It's something we created." He smiled warmly, pulling me close. "Then let's keep building it." And as I leaned into him, heart finally healed and whole, I understood exactly what victory truly meant. Not revenge, not bitterness, but freedom. Freedom to choose my path, to build a future defined by love, respect, and strength. And I'd found exactly that. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. It skittered across the coffee table like it had a life of its own, vibrating in short, sharp bursts. Mom. Then Dad. Then Tyler. Again. And again. And again. It was like watching the same terrible sitcom rerun over and over, except this wasn't funny. Not even close. I didn't reach for it. Didn't answer. Didn't flinch. I just sat back against the worn leather of my second-hand couch, arms crossed, eyes fixed on that little screen dancing across the wood like it might explode if I ignored it long enough. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I walked out of that house for the last time. No shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatics. I'd simply picked up my duffel bag, stuffed in a few clothes and my laptop, and left. Calm as can be. Done. Completely done. At the time, I thought that would be the end of it. They told me not to come back, and I took them at their word. Simple, right? But here they were, months later, blowing up my phone like I'd ghosted them on Christmas, like I owed them my soul all over again, like I hadn't spent the last decade playing the role of their unpaid therapist, errand runner, and personal banker. I leaned back into the cushions, let out a slow breath, and smiled, just a little, just enough to feel it in my chest. that twist of dark satisfaction, because this chaos was proof that I'd finally done it. I'd finally shaken them. They didn't own me anymore. Not like they used to. And yet the buzzing continued. Persistent, desperate, a digital reminder of everything I had escaped, and everything I still hadn't truly left behind. If you're reading this or listening, I guess, you're probably wondering how I got here. How a 29-year-old finance analyst, the good daughter who never once caused a scene, ended up ghosting her own parents and turning off her phone like they were just another scam caller. Well, buckle up, because it's not the kind of story you can wrap up in a few neat lines. No, this one's messy, ugly, and exactly the kind of thing I wish someone had told me could happen when you love your family more than they'll ever love you back. My name is Jordan Evans. Born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, I was the straight A student, the one who got herself into college with scholarships and midnight shifts. The girl who never drank in high school, never skipped class, never gave my parents a single reason to worry. Meanwhile, my older brother Tyler, well, let's just say he lived a very different life, and they adored him for it. But we'll get to that. All of it. The favoritism, the gaslighting, the financial drain, the day they told me I was ungrateful and kicked me out of the house I was secretly paying for, and how that day set off the first real breath I'd taken in years. Right now, what you need to know is this. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I was done. Because sometimes the only way to love yourself is to stop loving the people who keep bleeding you dry. And today, as I sat in my small one-bedroom apartment with my phone lighting up like a slot machine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. The power to do absolutely nothing. I let the phone buzz. Let it scream in silence. Let it remind me how far I'd come. And I didn't move an inch. Because for once, they were the ones panicking. Not me. And God, that felt good. I wasn't born into chaos. It crept in slowly, like water leaking through the cracks in the foundation. At first, it just felt uneven. Slightly off, like maybe I was imagining things, that maybe I was too sensitive, that maybe love really did come with conditions. You just had to meet them right, consistently, quietly. I was 8 when I first noticed it. Tyler broke a neighbor's window with a baseball bat, and Mom rushed to defend him before the glass even stopped falling. He didn't mean to, she cried, hugging him like he was the one who'd been hurt. Dad paid for the damages without blinking. No grounding, no scolding, just a sad smile and a pat on the head. A week later, I accidentally knocked over a vase while cleaning, and the look Mom gave me could have sliced stone. You're better than this, Jordan, she hissed. Don't disappoint me again. That became the refrain of my childhood. You're better than this. Be the example. Tyler's struggling right now. He needs support. Tyler was always struggling. From age 10 to 33, that never changed. He flunked out of high school twice. Mom blamed the teachers. He quit college after a semester. Dad said the curriculum wasn't a good fit. He floated from job to job like a leaf on water, never staying anywhere long enough to be held accountable. And through all of it, he was coddled, protected, understood. I, on the other hand, was the rock. At 16, I got my first job at a fast food joint down the street. I'd come home smelling like grease and tired to the bone, but no one asked how my day went. They were too busy calming Tyler after his latest life crisis. When I got a full-ride scholarship to Ohio State, Dad grunted, "That's good," and went back to his paper. Mom didn't even look up from her soap opera. But when Tyler posted an out-of-focus photo of himself standing outside a community college 2 years later, they printed it and framed it like it was a diploma. I didn't get a celebration. I got expectations. You see, in our house, love wasn't given, it was earned. And even then, only sometimes. I learned how to stay quiet, how to be useful, how to make myself small when Tyler needed the spotlight, and how to expand just enough when Mom needed someone to complain to about how hard life was. I paid the bills on time, got straight A's, kept the fridge stocked when no one else would. I didn't ask for help because I knew it wouldn't come. But deep down, I kept hoping that maybe if I just held it all together long enough, they'd finally see me. Not as the backup plan, not as the safety net, but as their daughter, their equal. Spoiler, they never did. And Tyler? He didn't have to lift a finger. Not when I was always 2 steps ahead, catching what he dropped. Not when Mom insisted he just needed more time to find his path, and Dad mumbled about how the world's harder on boys nowadays. I was building a life brick by brick, and Tyler was drawing stick figures in the dirt, and somehow I was still the one being asked to slow down, to wait, to help, to give, and I did. For years, I told myself it was strength, that being needed meant I mattered, that love in our family looked like utility. But now, looking back, I realized that I wasn't loved. I was used. Every good grade, every late-night shift, every quiet sacrifice, it just made them expect more. Not appreciate more, just expect. So when you hear me say that walking away wasn't easy, believe me, it wasn't. I was trained from childhood to stay, to fix, to absorb. But even the strongest foundation can crack when the weight's not shared. And mine had been crumbling for years. It started with $20. Mom called one evening while I was finishing a report for my boss. "Hey, sweetie, we're a little short on the electric bill. Can you help us out just this once?" Her voice was soft, sweet, practiced. I didn't even hesitate. "Of course, Mom." I transferred the money before she could finish thanking me. That was the first time. The second came a week later. "Your dad forgot to do the groceries again," she sighed. "Could you pick up a few things? Just the basics, nothing fancy." And like the idiot daughter desperate for approval, I showed up with 4 full bags, fresh produce, meat, even the almond milk she liked. Then came the gas bill, the broken faucet, that we're behind on the mortgage, but it's just temporary. And suddenly, just this once became, "We'll pay you back soon," which evolved into, "We'd do it for you." But they never did. I started keeping track, first in my head, then in a spreadsheet. I was covering almost everything. Electric, gas, groceries, even most of the mortgage. Meanwhile, Tyler sat on the living room couch, controller in hand, playing video games like he was auditioning for a speedrun championship. No job, no rent, no shame. And every time I asked, every time, Mom's voice would get that trembling edge. "Tyler's trying his best," she'd whisper, like I was the villain for noticing reality. Dad would shrug, half asleep in his recliner, muttering, "We're lucky to have you, kiddo." As if that was gratitude. I told myself it was fine, that I could handle it. After all, I was the one with the job, the apartment, the salary. Tyler was still figuring things out, apparently into his 30s. But the truth? I was bleeding. Quietly. Steadily. My weekends vanished into errands for them. Grocery runs, bill payments, car maintenance. My paychecks disappeared into their accounts. And every month I told myself the same lie. They'll get back on their feet soon. But soon never came. Instead, I got eye rolls from Tyler when I brought up budgeting. I got guilt trips from Mom about how hard things have been since the recession. I got cold silences from Dad when I didn't send money fast enough. And I started to change. I got quieter, more resentful. I began dreading their phone calls, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew what they were going to say. I could hear the scripts in my head before they even opened their mouths. It wasn't communication anymore, it was a pattern of extraction. And yet, I kept going. I kept helping, even when I couldn't afford to. I dipped into my emergency fund, canceled a trip I'd been planning for months, stopped putting money toward my student loans. I was burning my future to keep their present afloat. And still, they looked at me like it was expected, like it was normal, like I owed them for giving birth to me. One day, I came over with groceries after a double shift and found Tyler lounging shirtless in the kitchen, eating ice cream from the tub. "You didn't get the good cereal?" he asked, not even bothering to thank me. That was the moment I felt something twist inside me. Not rage, not sadness, just something calcify, because I realized I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the lifeline, the wallet, the fix. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I provided. And the more I gave, the less they saw me. It wasn't physical abuse. It wasn't loud or violent or dramatic. It was quieter than that, colder. A kind of parasitic love wrapped in "you're such a good daughter," and "we're just going through a tough time." But tough times don't last forever. And at some point I had to ask, why do they expect me to stay poor? Just so they can pretend they're not. It was a Sunday in early October. The air had that brutal chill that made your bones ache before the sun even finished rising. I had just wrapped up a 70-hour week at the firm. Spreadsheets, back-to-back meetings, late-night client calls. My eyes were fried. My back ached. My bank account was still smarting from the last $600 I'd wired Mom for emergency utilities. But still, I showed up. Groceries in both arms, keys between my teeth, trying not to drop the bag of apples or the oat milk Mom liked even though no one else drank it. The porch light was on, which was weird. It was broad daylight. But I didn't think much of it. I pushed the door open with my hip, stepped into the house I grew up in, the house I'd been secretly keeping from foreclosure for 2 years, and immediately knew something was wrong. They were waiting for me. Mom sat on the edge of the living room couch, arms crossed, jaw tight. That look she saved for teachers who gave Tyler detention. Dad stood just behind her, hands in his pockets, face blank. Tyler was sprawled on the other couch, one foot on the coffee table, tapping away at his phone like he hadn't seen me. "No, hi, Jordan." "No, thanks for the groceries." Just silence. Heavy. Condensed. Measured. I set the bags down slowly. "What's going on?" I asked. Mom didn't blink. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. Dad stepped forward, voice casual, almost rehearsed. "We've been thinking. It's time you start contributing more." I stared at him. "Contributing more?" You make good money," Mom cut in. "It's not fair that we're barely scraping by while you're off living in your own place, spending your paycheck however you want." Something in my chest snapped clean in half. "I've been covering your mortgage," I said, voice low but shaking. "For 2 years. That's not enough." Mom scoffed. "A few bills here and there, that's hardly. My hands clenched at my sides. Groceries, utilities, rent, gas, insurance, all of it. Tyler doesn't pay a dime. He's 33 and hasn't had a job since 2019. But I'm the problem because I dared to move out and live like a functioning adult." Tyler rolled his eyes. "Jesus, Jordan. It's just money. They've done a lot for us." I snapped my head toward him. "Us? Tyler, what part of us do you belong to when I'm the only one footing the bill?" That was it. Mom stood, her face hardening like stone. "Don't talk to your brother like that. He's trying his best." I let out a laugh, so dry it burned. "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, his best looks like playing Fortnite in his underwear while I pay for your electricity." Dad's voice cut through, sharp and cold. "Enough. We're asking you to step up. If you were a good daughter, you'd take responsibility. This house is too much for us to manage alone." And there it was, the line they'd drawn with their entitlement, their guilt-tripping, their refusal to see me as anything but a utility. I inhaled, slow, deliberate. "Let me get this straight," I said. "You want me to pay the mortgage in full, cover all the bills, and keep pretending like Tyler isn't sitting here doing absolutely nothing, again. And you don't see anything wrong with that?" Mom's mouth thinned. "We just thought, as our daughter, you'd want to help your family. And what's Tyler?" I snapped. "A houseplant." Tyler bolted upright. "I hate you. I didn't ask for this." "No," I said, "but you sure as hell benefited from it." Then Mom's voice exploded. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." And for a second, everything stopped. Time. breathing, the world itself. I looked around the room, at the furniture I helped pay for, the lights I kept on, the people I gave everything to, and felt nothing. No sadness, no guilt, just clarity. I picked up my bag, walked to the door, opened it. The air outside hit my face like a slap, cold and clean. I turned back just once. Okay, I said, and then I left. No yelling, no speech, no drama, just done. And as I stepped off the porch, I realized for the first time in my life, they needed me more than I ever needed them. The first night in my apartment, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I was sad, not because I missed them. I cried because it was the first time in years that no one needed anything from me. No bills in my inbox from Mom. No missed calls from Dad. No text from Tyler saying, "Can you Venmo me real quick?" It was just me, a bare room, a mattress on the floor, a second-hand lamp, and peace. Real, complete, aching peace. I remember looking at the ceiling and thinking, is this what quiet sounds like? Because for so long, silence in my parents' house meant danger. Mom sulking, Dad waiting to scold, Tyler pouting because I didn't drop everything to help him. Every moment of peace there came with the tension of the next demand, the next sigh, the next favor. But now, the silence was mine. It wasn't weaponized. It wasn't bait. It wasn't a warning. It just was. I didn't answer their calls that week, or the next. At first, they came like clockwork, twice a day, sometimes 3. Mom left voicemails, each one dripping with guilt and performative sorrow. I know we had a disagreement, but this is childish, Jordan. Dad followed with his usual rational nonsense. Let's talk this out. You can't just cut off your family. And Tyler, of course, sent one text. Don't be a bitch. I blocked them all. It wasn't permanent, at least. That's what I told myself. I just needed space, time, oxygen. But 1 week turned into 2, then a month. And then the silence stopped feeling strange. It started to feel necessary. I started cooking again, sleeping, saving money. I bought a plant and didn't kill it. I remembered what it felt like to go an entire weekend without panicking about someone else's needs. I was still working long hours, still pushing myself at the firm, but when I got home, it was my home. And no one was waiting with a list of expectations taped to the fridge. There were moments of guilt, sure. Usually when I passed by a family in the park or saw someone FaceTiming their mom on the subway, I'd feel that little pull in my chest. Was I being cruel? Cold? Ungrateful, like Mom said? But then I'd remember. All those nights, they slept soundly while I stayed up crunching numbers to make sure their lights didn't go out. All those days I canceled plans, drained savings, ignored red flags just to keep them afloat. All those times I cried in the bathroom after wiring money I didn't have. And the guilt would melt into something else. Something harder, sharper, resolve. Because for all the love I poured into them, all I got back was obligation. They loved me the way a leech loves a vein, only as long as the blood keeps coming. So I stopped the bleeding. And in that stillness, something new started growing. Confidence, maybe, or just the slow, quiet realization that I had value outside of what I could give. I made friends. I went to the movies alone. I bought a new blazer without justifying the cost to anyone. I rediscovered what it felt like to wake up on a Sunday and not drive across town with grocery bags and a fake smile. For the first time in my adult life, I had nothing to prove, no performance to give, no roles to play, just Jordan, just me, and it was glorious. Until one morning, 6 months to the day, I woke up to a message from Dad. Why haven't you paid the mortgage this month? There it was, the punchline. After all this time, after they kicked me out, cut me off, cursed my name, they still assumed I'd be paying, as if my silence was just a phase, as if I was still on autopilot, quietly sending checks, being the good daughter behind the curtain. I stared at the message for a long moment, then smiled, not soft, not sad, The kind of smile that comes when you realize you're not the one drowning anymore, and you finally let go of the rope. I typed back, "Oh, I thought I wasn't welcome," and hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and waited for the storm. The reply didn't take long. First came Dad's text. "Jordan, this is serious. The bank is threatening foreclosure. Please call me." Then Mom, "What is wrong with you? We're late on the mortgage. The bank called us, Jordan." And finally, Tyler, ever the eloquent one. "Dude, seriously? You're gonna let them lose the house just to prove a point?" I didn't answer. I didn't even blink. I just watched the screen light up again and again, like a machine on the verge of short-circuiting. I let the chaos spin, let it stew. 6 months. 6 months of silence, and they thought I was still on the hook. Still theirs. It was funny. Not in a ha-ha way. More like watching a magician realize the rabbit's gone from the hat and he has no more tricks. They were unraveling, and for once, I wasn't holding the thread. But curiosity got the better of me. I called the bank, put on my most professional voice, polite, concerned, vaguely apologetic. "Hi, this is Jordan Evans. I used to handle my parents' mortgage payments, but I've recently stopped. I just wanted to check the account status." A pause. A hold. Some keyboard clicking in the background. Then the rep returned with a line that landed like a slap. "Ma'am, the account has been delinquent for nearly 8 months." 8 months. I blinked, sat perfectly still, did the math. That meant even before I left, even when I was still wiring hundreds of dollars a month to them, they weren't paying the mortgage. They were pocketing the money. I swallowed hard, thanked the rep, and hung up. Then I laughed. Quiet, bitter, too sharp to be joy. They'd been letting the house drown the whole time, and used me as the bucket. All those late-night transfers. All those paychecks chipped away for their temporary struggles. And they never even used it for what they said. They just watched the hole widen and figured I'd keep patching it with duct tape and devotion. I called Tyler. He picked up on the first ring. "Jordan, finally. We need you to fix this. Where did the money go?" I asked flat. A pause. "What?" "The mortgage. I was sending money for months, and the bank says the last full payment was 8 months ago. Where did it go?" He stammered. I don't know. That's not my thing. Mom and Dad handled it." "Oh, come on," I snapped. "You live there. You didn't notice the letters piling up? The red stamps on envelopes? You didn't think it was weird I was sending thousands of dollars, and somehow the power was still flickering?" "Look," he said, suddenly defensive. "They needed help, all right? Things got tight. It's not like you were struggling. You don't get to say that." I cut in. "You don't get to act like my success is the reason I should bleed dry." He huffed. "You're being cruel." "No," I said with the coldest clarity I'd ever felt. "I'm letting you face the consequences of your own stupidity. Big difference." I hung up. Then Mom called, and like a fool I answered. Her voice came through high-pitched and desperate. "How dare you, Jordan? You know we need help. The bank is threatening to take the house." I stayed calm. "And you thought lying to me for months was the best way to secure that help." "It wasn't like that," she snapped. "Tyler's been struggling." "You don't understand. Struggling?" I laughed. "He's been struggling for a decade. You know who else struggled? Me. Working night shifts, skipping vacations, paying your bills while you smiled and nodded like I was your personal ATM." Dad got on the line, his voice low, measured. "Jordan, we just need help this month. Just this one time. We're behind, yes, but if you can sell the house," I said. Silence. Then Mom, shrill, "We can't. This is our family home." "Then it should have mattered enough to pay for it," I replied. Dad inhaled sharply. "Please, sweetheart, be reasonable. We just need support, not judgment." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "No, what you need is accountability." "We're your parents," he said softly. "You will help us." I smiled. Looks like you'll have to figure this one out without me. And I ended the call. The phone buzzed again, instantly. More texts, more voicemails, more desperation. But I didn't care. Tightleat. They'd used me. They gambled my love and bet against my spine. And they lost. I didn't answer any more calls that night. I let them come. Mom's fury, Dad's pleading, Tyler's snide voicemails. The phone buzzed like it had a vendetta, thrashing on the table like a wounded animal. And I just sat there watching them scramble the way I used to. It felt good. Not triumphant exactly, but clean, like pulling out a thorn that had been buried too deep for too long. For the first time, I wasn't the one panicking. Wasn't the one trying to fix a mess I didn't make. I was done playing savior in a story that never cared if I bled. Eventually, I picked up the phone, not to talk but to type. To Mom, funny. You keep asking what kind of daughter I am, but I'm not the one who stopped paying the mortgage. I'm not the one who hid it for months. Maybe it's time you deal with your own mess. I sent it and let it sit. 5 minutes later, Dad called. I let it ring, then picked up on the third try. His voice was softer this time. Not desperate, exhausted. Jordan, this isn't you. We raised you better than this. I laughed, short and bitter. No, you raised me to be useful. You raised me to keep my head down and open my wallet. You raised me to believe that if I just gave enough, maybe one day you'd actually see me. He was quiet for a long beat. Then, finally, he cracked. We're sorry, Jordan. We messed up. But please, we need your help. We won't make it without you. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and let his words hang in the air. You said that before, I replied. Every time. You said you'd pay me back, that things would change, that it was just this once. But all I ever did was hold up the foundation while the rest of you took naps. We didn't mean to take advantage, but you did, I snapped. You took and took until there was nothing left of me but spreadsheets and late payments and empty weekends. He sounded small, broken. I'm sorry. Then show it, I said. Fix it yourselves. There was another pause. Then he whispered, Jordan, this is everything. The house, it's all we have. I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered all the times they let me carry the weight alone. All the times I asked for nothing, and still they made me feel like a burden when I couldn't give more. No, I said, it's all you have, because you never built anything of your own. You just drained it from me. I'm begging you. And I'm saying no. I hung up. The phone exploded again, texts pouring in like a dam had burst. From Mom, you don't understand. You'll regret this. From Tyler, nice job. You're destroying everything. Real classy, Jordan. From Dad, please. We'll pay you back. We swear. Just help us this once. But it was too late. They weren't asking for help. They were asking for another lifeline. Another extension of the lie. I typed one final reply. To all three of them, in a group message this time. No more hiding. You had years to be honest. You had months to ask without lying. You chose this, not me. I'm not your bailout plan. I'm your daughter, and you treated me like a paycheck. And then, I blocked them, not out of anger, out of necessity. I needed to close the loop, to put a period at the end of a sentence that had dragged on far too long. Because every time I picked up that phone, every time I listened to them spin their webs of guilt and panic, I forgot what I'd already learned. That peace doesn't beg for attention, and real love doesn't bankrupt you. I sat in the quiet that followed, heart pounding, hand shaking, but it wasn't fear this time. It was freedom. The silence after blocking them wasn't as satisfying as I'd imagined. It was heavy, thick, like the pause after a slammed door, the kind that echoes longer than it should. I stretched out on my couch, phone face down on the table. TV playing something I wasn't really watching. For the first time in years, no one could reach me. No one could drain me. But in the quiet, doubt crept in. Was I too harsh? Should I have offered a compromise? found some middle ground before torching the bridge? I mean, they are my parents. Tyler's still my brother. And the house, the one they're about to lose, it holds my childhood too. Birthday balloons taped to the kitchen cabinets. My high school graduation picture in the hallway. The scar on the doorframe from when I tripped racing Tyler to the fridge. But that's the trick, isn't it? Memory disguises itself as meaning. You start to confuse sentiment with safety. You start to think, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. Except it was. It was exactly that bad. They lied to me. Repeatedly. They took my money for months, years, and never told me the truth. They chose to let the house slip into default while I was still paying for it, and then expected me to clean up the mess after they kicked me out. No explanation. No apology. Just a demand. And when I said no, suddenly I was ungrateful. Cold. Cruel. But tell me, what kind of love demands your financial ruin in return for affection? What kind of family threatens you with guilt when they've already weaponized every sacrifice you've ever made? I didn't abandon them. They abandoned me the second they stopped seeing me as a daughter and started seeing me as a backup plan. And maybe that's what hurts most. Not the lies, not the money, but the realization that to them I was never Jordan. I was a job title, a debit card, a safety net with a smile. I turned the TV off. Let the quiet settle again. This time I didn't fight it, because the truth is I don't regret walking away. I regret not doing it sooner. I regret every time I ignored that tight feeling in my chest when Mom asked for just one more favor. Every time I skipped a vacation, canceled dinner with friends, avoided checking my balance because I knew they'd call again. I regret the years I spent thinking love meant sacrifice without limits. But I don't regret saying no. Not this time. Not anymore. Still, part of me wonders, will I look back years from now and feel guilt when I see that house boarded up? When I hear they had to move into a tiny rental, sell off furniture, downsize their lives, will Tyler finally be forced to grow up? Or will he just find another woman to drain? Will they ever understand what they lost? Or will I always be the villain in their version of this story? I don't know, and maybe I never will. But what I do know is this: I'm breathing easier, sleeping better, laughing more. My savings account isn't a war zone anymore. My weekends belong to me again. I'm discovering what it means to exist without constantly performing usefulness. And that feeling is worth every missed call, every angry text, every "how dare you?" Because I dared. I dared to say no. I dared to walk away. I dared to live like my value wasn't tethered to what I could give away. So here I am, alone, free, and wondering, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Did I let my anger cloud a chance to repair what was broken? Or did I finally do the only thing I could to survive? Let me know. Because this story, it's mine, but I think it might be yours too.